heard the woman's story and her testimony that she offers to the city. And because of that, one of the things we're doing today is we've invited a member of the congregation to come up and give us a bit of their testimony. So at this point, I'll welcome Dave Lefin up to the lectern. Thanks, Dave.
I'm not a good public speaker, so I ask your understanding if I read this instead of trying to just kind of do it ad lib. My walk with the Lord started when I was baptized as a Catholic at the age of 3 months old. We moved several times during my first 3 years of life until we finally ended up in Wayne, Pennsylvania. We would live there until I was 13. My first memories of church are from those days that we lived in Wayne. We went to a large church called St. Catherine's of Siena. My parents made me go to Catholic school for my first 2 years in elementary school. Catholic school did not go well for me. We were taught by nuns, and although I think they felt they were doing what the Lord was calling them to do, for me at least, it was torture. They were very strict, and if you got out of line, they would whack you with a ruler. So needless to say, in the classroom, everything was straight up and orderly. We behaved more out of fear than from respect. It was during these first 2 years of school that our whole class prepared for and received our first Holy Communion. What a big deal that was. Everybody was dressed up and we all processed into the church as a class. I remember thinking at the time, what's going to happen when I receive communion? Will it be amazing? I must admit, I remember feeling disappointed after receiving communion. I didn't feel any different. So what was the big deal? I wouldn't really understand the real concept of communion until much later in my faith walk. So my spiritual life, if you want to call it that, went on pretty well until I was 14, at which point I had to start going to catechetics. We had to go once every Wednesday evening for 2 hours for about 3 months. On Confirmation Sunday, I remember feeling mildly anxious to see if anything might happen during Mass. This was an even bigger deal. The bishop was coming to confirm us. But alas, there were no fireworks, no special feelings of elation. It was just another ceremony. The really sad point in looking back at this was that I did not understand what confirmation really meant to me at that time. I spent my first 2 years of college at the satellite campus of Penn State, the Berks campus. I met a fellow student during that time who would change my life forever. He was also an engineering student. He was one of the oddest characters I have ever met, up to that point or since. His name was David Toes. Dave was very soft-spoken, a devout Christian, and brilliant. We would talk about our faith, and I would always feel that I was missing something. He always made me feel that he was at a very different spot in his faith walk than I was. I went to University Park for my 3rd and 4th year in college. During the 2nd semester, I started going to the on-campus church again. Ironically, there was a priest named Father Aaron. He preached very different than any other priest I had ever heard before. He talked to us about what we were experiencing and how we should respond to this as Christians. I always felt uplifted when I left Father Aaron's Mass. David Toes made it up to University Park as well. He was the same soft-spoken, fiercely devout Christian I had known at Berks campus. He made me feel uncomfortable, and I avoided him. He asked me more than once if I was saved. I told him yes each time, and he wouldn't say anything else. It was annoying to me. I asked him on several occasions why he kept asking me the question. I was born and raised Catholic. Of course I knew Jesus Christ, and I believed in him as my Savior. He didn't say anything else. At the beginning of the 4th year of college, David Toes came up to me again and asked the same question. I decided this time to try a different tact. I said to him, "Dave, You keep asking me the same question over and over again. It seems obvious to me that you do not believe that I am saved." At that point, he said, "Come with me." He took me to a little park. He sat on the picnic bench, and he said to me, "Give your life to the Lord." Now I thought, if I do this, he will finally leave me alone, and it won't hurt to affirm my faith in Jesus. So, after a long hesitation, I got down on my knees, and I offered my heart to Jesus, professing him as my Lord and Savior. It was what I had heard others around campus say that the born-again Christians were saying. As in earlier stages in my life, I felt nothing special. Then I stood up, and he hugged me. I remember him saying that all of the angels in heaven were singing and were joyous at my profession of faith. I'm thinking to myself, this guy is half-baked. For the first 2 months after that afternoon in the park with David Toes, there was a remarkable transformation within my heart. I felt a sense of joy I had never felt before. It was a sense that did not go away. My walk with the Lord had finally, truly begun. The rest of the year was amazing. I was able to study more earnestly, and the 4th year ended on a positive note. I graduated. The next 2 years, I worked for a consulting engineering company, and I was miserable. I thought to myself, is this all that my life will consist of for the next 30 years? Through a number of experiences that I had through the church and personally, I decided by the end of the first year of work that I needed to make a change. So I applied for and was accepted as a pre-novitiate in the Order of St. Augustine. For 1 year, I lived with 3 priests and 5 other pre-novitiates in a house. We ate together, prayed together, studied together, played together. It was a wonderful experience. It was during this period of time that I came to know my Lord the best and to be the closest that I have ever been with him. He was present and with me for much of that time. I felt his presence and an overwhelming calm whenever I would pray and talk with him. Yet by the end of the first year, I had to make a decision. Would I move forward to the novitiate or leave? Moving forward would mean that I would take simple vows, which would lock me into the life of being like a priest for 1 year. Not doing so would mean that I would have to leave. It was the hardest decision of my life. Obviously, I left. I did so because I was afraid of being alone my whole life. Although I felt the Lord's presence, he still was not physically with me, and I was sorely afraid I would miss the warmth of human touch and companionship. Within 1 year of leaving, I met Debbie, my wife, on a camping trip. One of the major obstacles that we needed to overcome prior to our marriage was our religious affiliations. Debbie was Methodist, and I was Catholic. Although both of us were Christians, we did not worship together, which we agreed was not acceptable. So we worshiped together at different churches and eventually chose the Lutheran Church as our middle ground, where we could both feel somewhat comfortable worshiping the Lord together. When I reflect on my faith today, I see my faith as a series of waves, each one building higher and higher. Right now, I feel like I am in more of a trough before the next wave, and it makes me sad to think about where I used to be compared to where I am now. Although my relationship with the Lord was much more intimate at that time, I feel that my walk with the Lord today is more realistic. I struggle with my faith, being obedient every day. This in spite of what I have experienced in my life. It makes me feel bad about myself, but at the same time, I know that the Lord loves me and he understands my weakness. I do look forward to the day that I can finally see my Lord and give him a hug. Thank you.